Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Labyrinth, a podcast produced by Virtual Executive Director. My name is Becky Brett, and I'm your host. I'm an intuitive executive coach for artists, content creators, and entrepreneurs, basically anyone who uses their creativity to make a living. Now, as you've heard me say before, the mantra of The Labyrinth is release, receive, return. Using this mantra as a starting point, I help top performers release what is blocking their progress, receive new helpful beliefs, behaviors, and even relationships, and then I support them as they integrate or return these lessons into their lives. If this sounds like something you would like in your life, the application to work with me is in the show notes. My guest this week is Lauren Chu, the Communications Officer for Operation Groundswell. OG is a travel company with a conscience, leading backpacktivists to experiential learning opportunities around the globe. I should say, since we are recording this against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, when we can travel the globe, that is. They are obviously not leading any tours right now. That said, ethical travel and responsible international volunteering is at the heart of everything that they do, both abroad and at home. Now, what exactly does that mean? I'll link their manifesto in the show notes, but I do want to share 2 of the 9 points that particularly spoke to me. The first one is full life livin', and I love this so much. Here, the manifesto says, the world has infinite opportunities for wonder and enjoyment. Every tree can be a playground. Every street can be your dance floor. We squeeze the sweet nectar out of every opportunity the world throws at us. Gee, that mountain seems impossibly high, to which we would respond, that must mean that the top is impossibly beautiful. Ugh, how gorgeous is that? Now, the other aspect of their manifesto that I really loved is their take on leadership. We are training the next generation of positive leaders. There are enough leaders in the world that tell people how to think. We believe the greatest leaders are the ones that teach people how to think for themselves. Well, I could not agree more. And it is against this backdrop that I discovered Lauren Chu. Now, on this podcast, I love to interview people whose careers are, let's say, nonlinear. And Lauren started her career in manufacturing at PepsiCo. Quite possibly the opposite of the outdoorsy person who she is at heart. Despite studying engineering, Lauren much prefers valleys and mountains over valves and mechanics. She once planted 7,000 trees in a day, cycled the length of Vietnam from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City, and has been on a 500-kilometer hike through the Appalachian wilderness. In the summer, you can find her on canoe trips or hike and bike adventures. In the winter, she can probably be found playing a pickup hockey game on an outdoor rink or flying down a mountain on a snowboard. Lauren is keen to marry a passion for education with a love of travel, and she does that through OG. We're going to talk about all this and more, so please welcome into the Labyrinth, Lauren Chu.
Cool.
Everybody, I'm here with Lauren Chu, who is the communications officer for an outdoorsy nonprofit called Operation Groundswell. And the reason why I was so excited to talk with her is because she didn't start out this way. Lauren, tell everyone a little bit about your background.
Sure, yeah. So as you said, today I work in communications, but that's not where I started per se. I actually went to school studying mechanical engineering. And that was, out of high school was sort of not what I knew I wanted to do, but I figured it'd be easier to drop out of it than to get back into it later on if I decided that it wasn't it. So I went to school for that and, thoroughly enjoyed it. Don't regret a second of it. And coming out of there, I got a job working with Pepsi, actually. So studying from engineering, it wasn't exactly an engineering job, but it was in sort of supervision of the process of making pop. And so I was in a manufacturing facility, and my goal every day was how much pop can we make? How many cans can we turn out? How many bottles can we bottle? And I did that for close to 2 years. And I honestly, again, no regrets there either. It was an incredible work experience, and loved the people, and I learned just so much. But it became quite clear to me, about a year in, that I didn't want to focus my life on pop. It just wasn't the thing that was gonna really get me going, and it wasn't the thing that I felt I had the capacity to do. And I just wanted to use my energy in a different way. And from engineering to manufacturing, I actually decided to quit altogether and work as a guide for an outdoor company that led hiking trips around the world. So I worked as a guide for a few years, and eventually, having entered the world of outdoor education and sort of adventure travel, and this idea of ethical, air quote, travel, I ended up with Operation Groundswell.
Fantastic. I love that you say you have no regrets about your previous experience. I found that it all comes back in some way to be useful. Is there anything you've carried over from your Pepsi life to now that you find, or that might be a little bit surprising that you actually kind of utilize?
Yeah, there's so many things. I think the biggest thing was because I was working with such a diverse group of employees, just a greater understanding of what it means to connect with people who are different. And, I'm lucky to live in a city that is so culturally diverse, and I was lucky to be in a manufacturing facility and in a company that was really diverse. And my team was made up of all sorts of people, of all ages, of all backgrounds, with so many different life stories. And my favorite part of that job was connecting with those people, and that skill and that love and sort of that intimacy with people who are different but so the same has totally carried over in everything. So that was my favorite part, and that's still the thing that sticks with me the most, for sure.
Now, tell us a little bit about Operation Groundswell before we virtually step into the labyrinth and talk about what we'll need to release, receive, and return. Tell everyone a little bit about the organization.
For sure. So Operation Groundswell, our slogan, or our tagline, if you will, is backpacking with a purpose. And it's sort of hard to imagine, I guess, and you sort of think, what does that really mean, and what does it really look like? But we were founded a number of years ago on this idea that volunteer travel wasn't being done in exactly the way that it was perhaps intended to be done. And the people who we were trying to help, or the community that we were trying to engage with, weren't necessarily the ones benefiting in the end. And so it started with a group of students who wanted to go backpacking, and they wanted to volunteer, and they wanted to learn fundamentally why it was that all of these programs that set out to help ultimately, more often than not, failed to do just that. So that was sort of the idea that this organization was founded on. It's like, how can we see what's really going on? How can we get our hands dirty? How can we connect with the people who are experiencing, the trauma, the challenge, the oppression, and actually learn from them? Because as visitors, we often don't hold the solutions to other people's challenges.
Right?
And they know
what? We don't know how to fix everything.
Yeah, it was sort of this realization that no, there's actually amazing people in country who have dedicated their entire lives to these to solutions, and so we actually just have a lot to learn from them. And so when we go backpacking and when we travel, how can we do so in a way that engages with those incredible change makers and activists and sort of just folks on the ground who are influencing change? And how can we learn from them? How can we connect with them? How can we sort of just exchange, information and fun, and help out where and when we can, and where and when it is sort of absolutely needed, but not just what makes us feel good about it.
Right. It seems like you Operation Groundswell approaches this with a spirit of curiosity instead of heroism. Like, we're
Mm,
gonna swoop in
yeah.
and fix you.
For sure, for sure. We say sort of, if you're looking for like a pat on the back volunteer experience, this isn't it. And if you're looking to sort of like save, if
The
you're looking to
children or
save
whatever.
the
Yeah.
children, or if you're looking to save a country, like, this isn't it. It's just not possible. You're going to learn so much, and the impact is really going to be, on you and on some of the people around you. But the beauty is sort of what you learn when you travel and how you can apply that back home. So how does meeting with these really cool people influence how you act and interact with your community back home?
I love it. I love it. And experiential learning is really what it's all about, right? I mean, immersive, um, and we don't have all the answers. Go
Yeah,
figure.
yeah. No,
Go
it's
figure.
just this curiosity, like you said, and I think a humility, a
Mm,
little bit too. Just
yeah,
acknowledging that we're guests somewhere else, and as long as we're sort of conscientious and humble, but like prepared to change, like just so ready and eager
hmm
to be influenced by what we see and what we experience.
I love it. Okay, we are going to metaphorically step into a labyrinth,
Great.
and the mantra is release, receive, return. And I'd like us to approach it from the perspective of someone who is going on an Operation Groundswell trip.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I am new to this, what do I need to release
Mm-hmm.
before, or what are some things that people release during their experience? What do I need to release before I even leave my house? Let's talk about that. What do we need to let
I
go
love
of?
that. Yeah, I love this way of looking at it also because we like to say that a program with Operation Groundswell doesn't start when you hit the ground in wherever it is you're visiting. It starts the day you sign up because
Mm,
there's so much we can do before we leave to really put us in that mindset of being an ethical and conscientious and responsible traveler. Um, so, the first part of every program is actually, we call it an interview, but it's a conversation with one of our alumni. And that's really to release expectations and to release any sort of fear. You're always going to have, some worry about what's going to come, and you're always going to be nervous, and that's good because you care. But it starts with a conversation with an alumni who's been on a program to really get a real understanding of what it might look and feel like, and start getting in that mindset of just having, really open-minded perspective around what it's going to be like. Getting rid of sort of expectations of what a day-to-day thing might be, getting rid of expectations of what, people in a certain place might be like or act like, and just sort of stepping out into this really sort of like meta view where you can just be ready to receive what happens and not have any expectations or a particular mindset. Just like, all the way out. Just take a step back,
When you
relax. It's all going to work out.
You know what? A friend of have a little bit of an improv background, and that is something that is very, very improv-y to a way of looking at it is that and everything or anything and everything that happens is exactly what should happen.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, to release any expectations about the outcome and how it quote should go, because it's going to go exactly as it's supposed to. Thinking back to your first trip, what did you personally release?
That is a great idea or question. um, I think my first trip with Operation Groundswell was so different because before that, I felt this sense of almost invincibility. I was so confident and I was so, I had spent close to a year living in New Zealand, backpacking around by myself. And I had done this epic bike trip in Vietnam, spending a month cycling down the coast. And I had done all of these sort of epic adventures. And I really felt like I could just figure it out. I was so able to navigate the streets and connect with locals and do things in what I thought was a responsible sort of way of doing things. And my first trip with Operation Groundswell definitely humbled me in a way that was so beautiful, because I realized that connections, like true connections with local communities, can't be built in an hour, of meeting them. And so I really had to just let go of this idea that I could just immerse immediately upon arrival. Because I thought that I had figured it out. I thought I could just, find my way into these nooks and crannies and feel at home and be welcomed. But seeing the partnerships and the true collaboration between Operation Groundswell and the organizations that we work with on the ground was something totally different. Because they've been built on years of trust and of working together and of building something beautiful together. And so it was just a totally different level of immersion that I had never experienced before. And so I really just had to let go of the idea that I could do it all myself, and that I was, solo travel was the way to go. And that, I just had all of these ideas about travel that were shattered on my first program.
Wow. I mean, that is a I love how you describe that as a beautiful humbling.
Yeah, it really was. It was very humbling in the best way possible. I think everybody needs to be, knocked down every now and then just to be brought back down to earth. And yeah.
Yes, I know. Well, like the universe does it out of love and kindness, even though it might not feel like it in the moment.
Yeah, no, and it's the whole growth part, right? Like you're never gonna grow if you don't have those moments of sort of challenge or awakening or whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. Well, okay, once we have released expectations, released the fear, released our own maybe tiny bit of arrogance about what we're capable of on our own, what comes in its place? Like, what do we receive when we're on one of these trips?
It's hard to put it into a few words, but I think the thing that's the hardest to explain to people before programs, but that becomes so important when we're on a program, is taking the experiences and turning them into lessons, but in sort of the most, non-academic way possible. And so we receive, lifelong lessons and lifelong sort of, they're not just experiences that have a particular place. And it's not just like, oh, I met this person and now that moment is sort of totally separate and it lives in Guatemala and it lives in Peru. It's turning that moment into something bigger that you can apply to the rest of your life back home. And it's finding ways to connect that moment to everything else and not isolating that moment to the place in which it happened. And what we try to do on a program is really connect those two. So, really amazing discussions and conversations that are guided, but not in a way that feels, like a lesson, but in a way that lets everybody turn that moment into something greater and really reflect on everything that we're seeing and experiencing. So, yeah, I think it's that in between that becomes the part that is most important, and it's taking those experiences and turning them into something greater that ends up being some of the most impactful stuff on our program. Can
you think of a moment either that maybe you had or someone else had where that was so perfectly embodied?
Yeah, I'm sure there are so many. I think there's one activity that we do, and I won't give too much of it away because it's fun to experience sort of for the first time, but a lot of our programs involve homestays. And so living with a family that is local, and sort of just, having that language barrier and having that cultural barrier, and for a few days, you just figure it out. But before that, we really want to be conscious of how our own way of living back home is different, and how different doesn't mean bad. And so there's just this cool little activity that we do usually the day before we go into these homestays, and on the surface, it's just a card game. It's a card game, and it's a fun little card game, and you just play it, and everybody sort of just thinks, oh, like, we're just playing a card game. It's just to kill some time, have fun or whatever. But the game has a bit of a twist, and the twist teaches this incredible lesson, and it's almost like a metaphor for cultural differences and sort of language barriers and communication and what the rules are of one person's culture versus another. And so, yeah, I'm sorry that was a bit ethereal, but
well, we want to preserve the experience, right, for anyone who's going to do this. I get that. Yeah. So, okay, a couple questions pop into my head. Number one, what if I'm terrible with foreign languages? Can I still do this?
Yeah, for sure. And sort of please. I think that's sort of such a fun part of it. We have 2 program leaders on every program, and at least one, most of the time, both are fluent in the local language and have significant experience in the country if they're not, from the region or from that country itself. And so they really do act as facilitators and educators, but translators as well. Okay. And I think, personally, the scariest part, but also the most fun part, is always trying to communicate with somebody in a language that isn't the one that you know. And yes, for sure, we welcome that, and it's a fun part. And learning the language is all part of it as much as we can.
Right. And then my second question is, what are some assumptions we make about the way we live, and then we maybe like bring it into another culture, and it's like, no.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, there's sort of an infinite number, and there's so many that become obvious, right away. And then there's so many that are just actually just sort of nuanced and behind the scenes and not quite so obvious at first. Something so simple as wearing shorts, in North America and Europe, and where I am anyway, women wearing shorts is a thing that happens in the summer. Mm-hmm. But in some of the more remote, more traditional indigenous communities, that level of sort of, skin showing and sort of that type of attire isn't respectful. And so just in the interview and in our preparations, just telling people what the expectation is and sort of what the cultural norm is, where we will be going, and inviting people to respect those sort of norms. So, we'll be spending X days in this community. Most women wear long skirts. And so if you have long pants and if you feel comfortable and if that is something that you want to do to respect local culture, bring a pair of pants, bring a skirt. It's something as so simple as the clothes we wear can have a really big impact on how we are received as guests in someone else's home. And so just making participants aware of that is, it's important.
I imagine, these being a homestay, that's exciting and a bit scary, but I imagine that has an impact on the host family too. Are the host families sort of like repeats, or do you get new ones each time?
Yeah, really good question. For the most part, families who host international guests, the organizations that we work with anyway, do it as part of sort of their community tourism initiative. And so it is part of their livelihood. Having guests is part of the way that they, make money and they sort of support their own family. And so they're quite used to having guests every now and then. And so, the family that I stayed with in Guatemala, they had 2 kids, and the youngest was about 10, and he just wanted to talk to us in English. Like, he wanted to learn. He wanted to know what was up. He was asking me about my favorite music and likewise, and favorite soccer stars. And they're sort of well accustomed to guests in their home. It is, we make sure to partner with organizations who are compensating these families fairly for their time and resources, and sort of that intrusion, if you will, into their lives.
um, so totally random, and I may edit this out, but
Okay.
when I was in high school, my family hosted exchange students like every year. I was in high school, either for the year or for shorter periods of time, or we had a teacher from Brazil one year who we're still,
That's so cool.
Yeah. Is that something you did as a kid, that your family did? Or how did you get interested in travel?
That's also a wonderful question. So I didn't participate or host any, exchange students or what have you. But I was lucky to have parents who valued travel, and my dad often traveled for work. And so being a bit of a tag along on those trips was awesome. And I think their love for different cultures definitely inspired my love for travel as well. And obviously just the privilege of being able to go, different places on vacation with them. I would say where we depart is my love for the backpacking, outdoor, perhaps not so glamorous side of things. And yeah, but I think, I'm lucky to have had a family that valued those differences and embraced them and wanted to see more.
Yeah. I think our parents can impact us. I mean, we've discovered this throughout all of childhood development, but our parents impact us in ways we don't even know. And it's interesting to hear about like the kids of the families that host also. Like, I wonder what those kids are going to grow up to do, being exposed to so much.
It's so true. Yeah.
As a child. Okay. So we have released expectations and fear. We have received new, maybe like rules, or we've received an acceptance of differences and an openness and willingness and curiosity to be different in a different culture. And maybe we've even received some new language skills, who knows, at least some type of communication. Now, how do you find that that participants integrate all of this experience when they come back home?
Yeah. Super. Yeah. So our programs, each program has a general theme. So, for example, we have an animal-focused program in Southeast Asia. We have a coffee-focused program in Guatemala, a program in Peru that talks a lot about medicine and sort of healthcare and just this idea of traditional medicine and traditional methods and traditional plants and all that. And so a lot of applying it to back home actually starts on the program, because we are experiencing all these different things and learning all these different things about a way that something is done somewhere else. And then in reflection, in our discussions in the evenings and, whenever we have a chance, we're starting to bring it back home. On our coffee program, for example, at the end of the program, we talk about the coffee supply chain in its entirety. And we hear from one of the cooperatives, and they talk to us about how much of, as a percent or as a dollar amount of your coffee that you get at Starbucks or at the coffee shop back home actually ends up in the farmer's, pocket, if you will. And so we start to tie all of that back into how changes or actions that we make at home actually do have a huge impact, or tiny impact, but in aggregate have a huge impact on people halfway around the world. And so a lot of that definitely starts on the program. And then back home, we sort of do the best we can to keep our alumni engaged and connected to those communities, so that when they leave, it's not, something that happened way back when. It's keeping tabs on what the organizations are doing now. How have they progressed? What work have they done since? Can I stay involved? And if not, how can I be influenced by their work or inspired by their work to do some of that at home? And so much of sort of these ideas of like social and environmental justice are applicable everywhere. And so if on a program you learn about reforestation as a way of resistance, as a way of conservation, as a way of regeneration, you can apply that back home, right? You can find local organizations who are doing similar work, or you can, start your own, or sort of do it yourself. So yeah, I think just being exposed to all of these different ways of bringing communities together, advocating for change, and inspiring change can be applied locally for sure as well.
How have you changed as a result of this?
Yeah, I think for a while I was so paralyzed by not wanting to do anything for fear of doing the wrong thing. And having been on program and just seeing all of these people who are just so, fearless and so passionate about the things that they care about and so willing to just act, it has definitely made me more confident, might not be the right word, but more willing to act in any way that I can, knowing that I'm doing the best I can with the knowledge that I have, and just being willing to change. Yeah, so I think it's been, I may not be able to change the world today, but I can change one thing today, and having the confidence and sort of like the willingness to make that one small change, to share with my network a particular thing that's happening, or a thing that I care about, or things as simple as like signing petitions, or being more engaged in my community, going to meetings that are being held about developments that are happening, or about, things that are being torn down, or things that need just people there to listen and learn, and just show up. I've been much more willing to do those little things in my own community, because it's little, but again, in aggregate, if we all start doing those little things, it'll totally add up.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point about being paralyzed by not wanting to do the wrong thing, so you don't do anything. I think we've seen that really explode over the past year when it comes to racial justice, when it comes to the environment, when it comes to, just dealing with COVID-19. Can you think of one sort of maybe pivotal moment for yourself, where you got over that paralysis, like something that you resisted doing, but you finally got over it? And then how did it turn out?
Yeah, that's for sure. So where are you based again?
Oh, I am currently in southwestern Virginia. So I'm in Virginia, but like the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think one moment where this really sort of, where I had that confidence to do something and it ended up being really rewarding, was right after I quit my job at Pepsi. I decided that I'd always sort of enjoyed writing, and I wanted to share my experiences outdoors and camping and backpacking and, in the backcountry with whoever cared to read. And so I started this little website and this little blog, and it started out as just being stories of weekend adventures, how to bike from here to here, and how to camp for 5 days here, and how to hike this trail, and that kind of thing. And the more that I sort of became engaged with social and environmental justice issues, the more that I realized that if I had this platform, no matter how small, I was going to use it to advocate for those things that I cared about. And one pivotal moment was there's an outdoor company similar to REI in the States, in Canada, and it's called MEC, Mountain Equipment Co-op. And they came out with this statement a few years ago about how they realized that they had not been acknowledging the diverse, customer base that they had. And they just sort of sent out this statement that said, we haven't done a good enough job representing the diversity that exists within Canada, and we haven't done a good enough job, representing these communities. And we realize now that they are part of our community. And this was a few years ago. I don't remember the exact message, but it didn't sit well with me for a number of reasons. And I decided I was going to write about it. And so I wrote this open letter to Mountain Equipment Co-op about how I felt that their statement on diversity had failed in a number of ways. And it was more of an invitation to talk about it, and an ask that they consider or think about the things that I was asking. And before I posted it, I remember I sent it to a bunch of friends, and I was like, should I post this? Should I not post this? And I was like, oh, who cares? Who's going to read it anyway? But
famous last words, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At this point, it was my family and friends who'd be following around this blog. And so I was like, whatever, I'll just post it. And one of the employees at the MEC head office in Vancouver actually ended up reaching out to me and said, hey, I read your article. I thought it was really good. Like, let's talk. And so it ended up with me having this conversation with, at the time, I think she was responsible for diversity, equity, and inclusion at MEC. And she was a full-time staff, and had this wonderful conversation about how they could do better. And so, yeah, it was just such a small little thing. I thought, I'm just writing on this silly blog that has a few views every day, and advocating for doing better when it comes to, in this case, racial justice and diversity and inclusion. And it led to this wonderful conversation. And, I don't know what happened after that conversation. They have gotten a lot better with the stuff that they've been putting out, and sort of acknowledging diverse communities. But it was really cool to see what I thought wasn't that big of a deal have some sort of an impact, no matter how small. So, yeah.
Wow. That is really cool. Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah, what the heck? Why not?
Yeah.
And, even now I realize some of those things that I wrote in that article are totally dated. And if I were to rewrite it now, I would write a very different article, and maybe I will. But just being able to that's, things have changed, and I've learned different things, and here are the new things I've learned.
Yeah. I think you made such a good point earlier too, about doing the best with the knowledge you have in the moment. Thankfully and hopefully we are constantly evolving and learning and getting better. And, I think I agree with you that it's better to do something with what you know now than to do nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we all need to be better at forgiving not only ourselves for changing, but for other people for changing too. I mean, so much of our identities are wrapped up in what we believe. And then when we learn something new from somebody else, it's almost like this jarring experience to change because of something or somebody else, because you almost feel like you're redefining yourself. And it's really hard, and it's really sort of hard to detach people from their previous actions or experiences, but it's the only way that we're, but it's so important. And I think, we all need to be a little bit kinder to each other and ourselves when we want to change. Because it's good most of the time, you learn something and you change.
I think if anyone listening is looking for permission, here is your permission. Here is your invitation to love and forgive your past self and your past beliefs and your past behaviors in favor of whatever new information you have now, and embrace the new information you have, the new ways of being, the new beliefs, the new whatever you've learned. I mean, that's part of life, is learning and growing and evolving. And so everybody, you are fully permissed and invited.
Go ahead, do it.
Well, this has been amazing, Lauren. Thank you so much for your time this morning. A couple things. How can people get more of you and Operation Groundswell? And then is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, very cool. Good stuff. Thank you so much for having me. I do just want to sort of acknowledge that, well, first, you can find Operation Groundswell online. It's a bit of a tongue twister of a name, but it's just operationgroundswell.com. But we're in the middle of the pandemic still, and we are not traveling. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that we are not in a position where it is, safe for both us nor responsible for us and the communities that we visit to be traveling to them right now. We are so excited to hit the ground running when it is possible, but we can't, in good conscience, be a responsible travel operator and risk bringing, a virus or anything bad to these communities whose healthcare infrastructures are totally different than ours. So yeah, the last year has obviously been a challenge for so many people and a travel company, no less. But it's so important for us that we are committed to our partners on the ground. And that means supporting them, whether we're traveling or not. It means sharing their stories, whether we're visiting them or not. And it means only visiting them when the risk and the responsibility makes that possible. And so, we're so excited to rebuild community-based travel. And there's this incredible opportunity for folks who will be traveling in a post-COVID-ish world to rebuild travel better. And so I think the only thing I would say is I encourage people to rethink the way that they travel when we can again. And also think about the communities who rely on travel and on tourism for their lives. Because for so many of us, it's something that we enjoy doing, but not so much something that, gives us everything we need. But for most of the communities that we visit, responsible community-based tourism is the way that they all make their living. And so it's easy to sort of forget that while we're not there, and it's easy to just compartmentalize it. But thinking about all the people that you visited and all the people that you will visit, what are they up to right now, and how can we support them, even if it isn't monetarily, but even if it is just in solidarity and sort of sharing their stories and work, so that when we can travel again, we're there for them.
And so how is Operation Groundswell doing that right now?
Yeah, so right when everything hit, we pivoted pretty quickly into direct fundraising because a lot of our partners were in crisis mode. So we did a bit of fundraising, which was pretty successful. And ever since, we've been running all sorts of sort of virtual programs for our community. So we had, writing workshops, we had a coffee tasting session, we have a few cooking sessions coming up. We published a cookbook with all of the recipes from all of our partners to sort of raise money for those folks. And just finding ways that we can provide value to both our community and to those partners.
I noticed there's like a monthly fundraiser on the website too, isn't there?
Yeah, it's really, that's something new that we're doing, just because we realize that it's not going to be all over, right away, and that some of our partners need a bit more of a sustained support. So every month we're focusing on a different partner, whichever needs, sort of timely help. And this month we're working with Alma de Colores, which is a labor inclusion group in San Juan in Guatemala. And they employ folks with disabilities. And without a job, those folks are having a much harder time finding other work. So instead of sort of just raising money for them, we're actually going to we are currently selling meals from their restaurant. So anyone can buy a meal from their restaurant, which keeps them all employed. And then those meals will get donated locally. So we've got a monthly fundraiser.
Awesome. And you mentioned Rebuild Travel Better. What does that look like?
I think it means putting our hosts first is a big part of that. And I think it is, it's continuing to acknowledge that when we go somewhere, we are guests in a place that somebody else calls home. And so I think as much as we can keep that in mind when we travel again, we'll be in a better place. And environmentally, it means, what can I do if I am going to travel to minimize my impact? So, I think those are the two big things that come to mind right away anyway.
Yeah. Well, that is fantastic. Thank you. Thank you again so much for your time and for the work you're doing globally. fascinating. This is fascinating. And I mean, let's all do what we can to get back to being able to get together in person, gather in person, and travel. And I think that I mean, Zoom is what it is, and it's great that we get to, chat with everyone all over the world. But that in-person experience, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, for sure. No, we can't wait for when that happens. And until then, we'll do our best. So,
yes, exactly. Do our best with what we've got.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Lauren, and thank you to everyone who listened. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really love us, please leave a review. Hey, if you don't already, follow me on Instagram. I'm at beckybrett.live for daily information, inspiration, and support. And if you're looking for a coach, the link to my application is in the show notes. Remember, you can lose yourself in a maze, but you can find yourself in a labyrinth.